Sid Dewberry started his company in Fairfax County nearly 60 years ago. As an engineering business in the county, his business grew, as did the county. But Sid also worked with county institutions and county government to ensure that the processes and the structure were in place that would enable that growth. Sid started the Engineering and Surveyors Institute, of which he was the original chairman, and his company has grown with the county. He was also the rector at George Mason University and supporter of many, many good works throughout Fairfax County.
Well, when Jerry called me, he asked me to talk a little bit about how the development process has changed in Fairfax County in the last 60 years. I'm going to push that up to 80 years. Matter of fact, I'm going to push it up to 1927, the year that I was born. As far as I'm concerned, nothing happened before 1927. And now, my great-granddaddy in 1851 bought 1,351 acres of land in Pittsylvania County, Virginia, which is the southern part of Virginia, and he paid $1,351, $1 an acre at a public bid. We were raised on that farm. It was a big farm, and you could do anything you wanted to do. You didn't need a permit for anything, except in the first or second grade, Miss Anderson was our homeroom teacher. She finally died a couple weeks ago at age 102. And if you had to do anything, like go to the bathroom, you held up your hand until she recognized you. And holding up your hand and say, "May I be excused," was a code word you wanted to go to the bathroom. So she'd let you go to the bathroom, but she'd say, "Be back here in 5 minutes." And if you weren't back in 5 minutes, she took that little 12-inch ruler that she always had with her, and you held your hand there like this, and she pounded the heck out of that hand. It hurt. She'd either make you sit by a girl or take the paddle, and you could have your choice. And at 6 years old, you didn't want to sit by a girl. In those days, today at 6 years old, I think they do want to sit by a girl, but it changed. But on that farm, there was a liquor still back on the back 100 acres. You couldn't hardly get there without walking a long ways, climbing a hill and going through some brambles and whatnot. But the people who made liquor wanted to go to a secluded place. So on that farm, about twice a year, they would build a liquor still. That was the only thing that you needed a permit for. You couldn't get a permit for that because that's illegal. The state wanted a piece of the tax money from that. But White Lightning was made back there, and it'd have a big wooden barrel that the guys leaned against there, where you put in cornmeal and sugar. And they would ferment for a couple of weeks, and then you put the mash in a copper kettle that is there, and heat it to 172 degrees Fahrenheit, which was the boiling point of alcohol. And then the alcohol would come out as steam, and it would go through a series of pipes and cool, and 200 proof would come out at the bottom of the thing. Well, the sheriff would learn about this from some disgruntled customer, and he'd come that night, and they would post a lookout. And when the lookout would see the sheriff coming and his deputies, he'd fire his gun off. And everybody would scatter in different directions. And the only thing he would get was his sledgehammer to break up the wooden barrel, and all of the mash would run down the branch into Reed Creek. And when we'd go down there to fish, we'd see some fish swimming around crazy looking. And he'd take the copper still, that was valuable, take it back to his office, and then he would sell it to his cousin, who was the culprit in the first place. And then the whole process would be retreated. Well, my great-grandfather, when he bought that land for $1,351, he put 1/4 down, and then he was instructed to pay 1/4 a year for 3 years with no interest, 0 interest. And we always wondered where he got his money from for that. I think we probably now know. But that's where I come from. You didn't need a permit to do anything. We got our start in Fairfax County in 1956. This is our drafting room when we got started. There are 7 people shown there, and 5 of them were our employees. The other 2 were stolen or borrowed from the guy who's a tenant next door. We wanted to look up like a bigger firm. That's what you call smoke and mirrors that you used in those days. Earl, I'm sure you never used that in trying to sell things. But Fairfax County at that time, believe it or not, had a rush on getting plans reviewed. We were a new kid on the block, and we didn't have much work, so we didn't have a conflict of interest in that none of the plans belonged to us. So they hired us to help them review their plans. So we had all of our crew working for them at $6 an hour for everybody, regardless of whether you were a rod and chainman or whether you were an engineer, $6 an hour. And the board of supervisors, I called the information officer in Fairfax and asked him for the board that was in power in 1957 is when we got that contract from them. And this is what they sent me. They say that's the board, but I don't think it is, because I remember going to the hearing that Bonnie Rasmussen presented to the board to get them to approve to hire our firm to help them review the plans. And after Bonnie had made his resignation, I was sitting on the back seat and didn't want to appear too obvious. The board, as I recall them, were all dairymen and farmers, and maybe some of Till's relatives were sitting on it, I'm not sure. But after the presentation, nobody said anything. It seemed like forever. Finally, one board member punched the guy next door and says, "What do you think?" He said, "Well, it sounds like a good deal to me. Well, let's approve it." So they approved it without any discussion. Today, there would be a 30-minute discussion over something like that, I'm sure. He got his experience in education in World War II, helping build the Alaska Highway through Canada and up into Alaska. So he knew roads and how to build those. And any time we engineers would submit a plan, he would tear it apart and want to make you do a lot more than was required by the code. And it would cost money for the developer to put in that. In those days, the manual said you could build a road by putting down what was known as bank run gravel. Most of it came out of Marcus Bless hole over here on Tyson's too, that he would sell that stuff, I think, for 50 cents a ton. And you'd lay it down, and that was your road. You'd pack it real good. No curb and gutter, no sidewalk. And Barney would always want to do more. He and Ann Wilkins got together and gradually passed board ordinances that required pavement to be put down, hot asphalt to be put down, and curb and gutters to be built, and sidewalks to be built. But Barney was really crucified a lot by the building community. And finally, under so much pressure, they transferred him to another department in the county, and it just broke his heart because he really was doing good for the county. He died 3 years later. Now this shows on the left there is the zoning ordinance, the current zoning ordinance. I have a copy here. If somebody would come up and hold that up for me, let everybody see it. That's the current zoning ordinance. And this is what it looked like in 1971. And the zoning ordinance was actually passed. The first one was passed in 1940. I was surprised that it was passed so early, but it was passed in 1940, and I've got a copy of that here. I had to get this off the internet, but it was surprising that it's like 56 pages long. And now it's about 1,000 pages long. It's only on the internet, so we don't use that book anymore. We can go on the net and see whatever page we want to see. But the other map up there, the other is the Public Facilities Manual, which is this one right here, which is something that we have to follow in developing the plans. And to the right of that is the, I don't know where that is, the little booklet here somewhere. Here it is. This was adopted in 1964, which is the Subdivision Control Ordinance. And that's about, I guess, 100 pages long. The first one was done in 1957, which was about 15 pages long. And that required practically no improvements whatsoever. Well, my job for my entire life has been preparing these, Jay calls me a subdivision doctor, prepare these subdivision plans, try to get them through the process is just such a long process that it's almost impossible to. Now, I show this one here. This is the first building that we built for ourselves in 1965. And I show you that because the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority was that tenant on the first floor, 5,000 square feet. That was about the only space available, I guess, in 1965. They had just been organized. I think they were called the Industrial Development Authority, and is that right? And so they moved in and paid us $3.50 a square foot rent, which was way too low. Should charge you more. But we were cutting the ribbon there for the opening of that building. And the fellow in the middle, John Parrish, was on the Board of Supervisors. He's another one of the guys that done bad and had to spend a little time in a clinker. And that's me on the left. You can see I still have my Till Hazel crew cut. Yeah, the Development Authority occupied the first floor. We tried to get a picture of them, but no one in the Development Authority could find it. They don't have it.
They're in jail.
Now this shows the Dewberry campus. There are four buildings there, and the little building right there is the first building that we built in 1965. This building in 1970, 1980, and 1990. And we occupy these two buildings here today, and we plan to we have torn these two buildings down because they're obsolete. We plan to put this building on that if we could find a tenant. That's another 200,000 square foot building. But the first building that we did in 1965, this is the plans for it, 3 sheets. That's all we needed. For the building that we plan to build, these are the plans right here that we had to develop. And then another drawing here shows a set of drawings. I've got a thing I can pass around here somewhere. Well, I won't bother. Lake Ann in Ruston had the townhouses that were built around that lake, the very first project that they had. The county, in a joint venture with the developer, are tearing those down and putting up some affordable housing on the rest of it. They hired us to do the site plan, and the site plan was 150 sheets long, and you're required now to submit 20 sets to the county. And each set goes to a different department in the county who reviews it and sends those comments back to the receiving engineer, who has to make all those corrections and then send them back. And the process goes back and forth for some time before you finally get approval. The approval process now is about 18 months. But that was a big improvement over what we did. Now, who is this? Does anybody know who that is? That's Sir Winston Churchill, alias J. Lambert. Just out of high school and was hired as a draftsman by Fairfax County. It was 1959. The first time I met Jay, I was up there trying to get Johnny Yamchuk to approve a plat that I had, which he did. And as I was walking out of this is an old courthouse, the red brick building that was built as an annex to the original courthouse, I think right after the Civil War. And this voice says, "Mr. Dewberry." So I turned and saw this little guy. Looks about the same shape then as he does now. And he came up to me and he says, "Mr. Dewberry, I'm Jay Lambert." I said, "Well, how do you do, Mr. Lambert? What can I do for you?" He said, "I want a copy of that plat you got under your arm." I said, "Well, what are you going to do with it?" He said, "Well, the county's asked me to make a tax map for all of the county, showing all the property owners, every piece of property in the county. And every time a new plat goes on record, I want to put it on my tax map." So I said, "Okay, yeah, you can take it. There it is." So I gave it to him. And so Jay and I have been friends and opponents ever since then. On several occasions, we've had to cross swords. I try to be real nice to him now because he's doing the Claude Moore farm and he's hired my firm to do his work. But it wasn't always that way. In 1987, the backlog for plans at Fairfax County was growing like leaps and bounds. Every day, every single day, they had a new classroom needed for the kids that were moving into the school. So we had 750 people, and all they were doing at that time is drawing subdivision plats and the plans and profiles that go with it. And we get them into the county as fast as we could because they had to get on a waiting list for about a year before the reviewers could get to them. And oftentimes the plans were not absolutely complete. And the building community got sort of fed up with that, so they got legislation passed that the county could not keep your plans longer than 60 days. So they keep them for 59 days and then make 1 or 2 marks on your plans and send them right back to the engineer. So that didn't work either. So the building development community sued the county. All sorts of pressure was put on them to do something. So Jay decided he would straighten the mess out. So he collected from the review department a copy of a plan from every engineer that was submitting plans, mine included. I accused him of fabricating mine, but he said, no, I wouldn't do that to you, see, so I'm sure he didn't. But anyhow, he had a press conference and said to the reporter from the Washington Post, the reason we have this delay is because the plans are faulty. They're incomplete. They're being submitted incompletely. And so by then, I had become known as sort of the dean of engineers in Fairfax. So the community came to me, the development community came to me and said, Sid, you got to straighten this out. I didn't do it all by myself. Tom Rust and John DeBell Jr. and some others helped. But we called on Jay and said, Jay, your people have just as much blame as we do. They're young, they're inexperienced. We'll submit a plan. It'll be reviewed. It'll come back a year later. And when we make the corrections, we'll send it, and another reviewer will pick it up and come up with other things that wasn't picked up, even with a different interpretation of some of the things the first reviewer did. So I said, the county, he said, well, Sid, I'm glad you see it my way. Let's cooperate. So we decided to hold a retreat, and we went to Williamsburg, Virginia. The whole engineering community went. Jay came one day, and I think he brought Audrey with him the first day down there. We met for 3 days. Now, Sunday night, January the 3rd, 1988, was the night that the Redskins were playing the Denver Broncos. Doug Williams was the quarterback. And we all gathered in I got 2 adjoining rooms, so about 25 of us gathered there, and we didn't have moonlight, but we had some refreshments. And watched that game. Of course, we won. That put everybody in a great mood. The Redskins won that. They were the Super Bowl champs, 42-10. So the next 3 days we spent talking with each other about how to solve this problem. So the end result was we set up a training organization to be paid for by the development community, who would allow the county to increase the fees enough so that the county could basically pay for this training thing. And we had gotten some enabling legislation through the General Assembly to permit the county board of supervisors to license engineers to be reviewers. The idea being that if a designated plans examiner, a DPE, prepared the plans and certified that they complied with all of these regulations, that they would be expedited and approved real fast. Well, it worked. It's helped a lot. We've gone from about 4 years down to about 18 months. It should be much less than that. But that's what happened, and I thank Jay for cooperating with us and making that happen. Now, Jay says I almost got him fired one time. Can I tell that story? Jay, Fairfax County had been trying for years through pressure from Reston citizens to get on the freeway, the Dulles Freeway that goes from Washington to Dulles Airport. Well, that FAA owned that, Federal Aviation Administration owned that highway, and they wouldn't let any commuters get on it. It was there to serve people from all over the world to go to and from downtown Washington to the airport. So finally, the state of Virginia passed some resolution that Senator Hurst sponsored, allowing the state to build parallel roads within the same right-of-way that FAA had acquired. And that's a major highway design project. And the state has a selection process when they want to hire an engineer to do a design job for them, to go through an advertising process, a long interview process, and finally select someone, not on the basis of price, but on the basis of qualifications. Well, the county didn't want to take that 6-month process, so they asked Jay to hire a local engineer to do that design. Well, Jay called the state and found 3 firms that were qualified to do it. We were one of them. We were the only ones that lived in Fairfax County. So he hired us on an emergency basis. So the whole process lasted about a week. And so we got a major contract. And before that time, we really weren't that good or that big or that well established in highways and bridges. We are today. Is more than 30% of our work. But then we weren't. He hired us anyhow. And the firms that were really qualified raised holy heck with him. He had a lot of explaining to them and a lot of explaining to the board of supervisors. But he stuck by us, and it stuck. So that's what he means when he said I almost got him fired over that. But I'm indebted to him for sticking by his guns, and we did do the job. We got it finished in about 18 months, and it went to construction right away. So that's my story. That's what you asked me to talk about, and thank you very much for letting me come.